afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another show of The Democratic View. And I'm the hostess. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and with me today is a woman we often see at the town board meetings. Her name is Kathleen Cunningham. She's called Kathy many times, and she's from the Quiet Skies Coalition. And the first thing we're going to ask her is to tell us a little bit about herself and how she got to where she is.
Okay, well, hi Phyllis, thanks for having me. I'm going to confine my remarks to the Quiet Skies Coalition and my activity as an airport noise abatement advocate. I have been active in that arena of town life for probably nearly 20 years, 18 to 20 years. The East Hampton Airport has grown markedly over the last 20 years, and I became involved when I actually lived in a different home, but not too far from where I live now, when touch and goes on the weekend, which is something I didn't even know what was, started to bother my weekend planning. I had a big house at the time with a pool, and I would sit outside with the kids because most of us don't go to the beach on the weekends because it's too busy. These circling aircraft would buzz the house like big mosquitoes, and I didn't know what that was. So when I started to get involved, I understood that to be an exercise called a touch and go, which is a training exercise for pilots that are learning how to fly. And what they do is they fly in a circle and they land, and then they take off again right away. So it's a repeated exercise, which makes sense from a training point of view, but to have that consistent noise around, the airport and homes near there. And 20 years ago, there were many fewer homes around the airport than there are now. Right. So, and then as the airport activity accelerated over the last 20 years, I became more and more involved. I served on the Airport Noise Abatement Advisory Committee, which was a town board appointed committee. And I think it was formed in 2004. I served on that till it was dissolved I think 2011 by the current administration. We were formed to advise the town board on noise mitigation protocols and how they were working, as well as to advise them about noise issues with respect to the master plan at the time. So I served as the chair of that committee for 5 years during its tenure, which was about 7 or 8 years.
And when did this group that you're in now, when did it organize?
The Quiet Skies Coalition organized last August, so it's not even a year old. It was organized by Barry Raybeck, who's a Wainscott resident, and Frank Daleen, who's also a Wainscott resident. Barry and Frank were the original chair and vice chair of the organization and have since moved on to other forms of support for this activity, but aren't as active in the Quiet Skies Coalition as they were in the onset. But we have representation from Southampton Township on it. We have residents of Southold Town that are part of our group.
Really?
Well,
I didn't know that.
The noise at the airport has an impact on many, many people besides those who live in the town of East Hampton. In fact, a reasonable argument could be made that more people outside of the town of East Hampton are more seriously impacted by airport noise than the East Hampton residents themselves.
So you mean they jump out of their bed at 7 o'clock on a Monday morning like I did this week?
Or maybe 5 a.m. Some of them even in the middle of the night. I live close to the airport, so I hear every single movement. And the 2 a.m. ones are the ones that get you. They're the ones that really...
I know, I'm up.
Yeah.
At 2 a.m.
Really
That's my bedtime.
Right.
But, so how did this group that Dominic Stanzione, the council person, this whole program that he is a part of, how did this get started?
Well, I'm not exactly sure of the genesis of all that. I know that the Airport Noise Abatement Advisory Committee was dissolved in January or February of 2011 and was replaced by something Dominic called a multi-town helicopter noise committee. The town decided to eliminate any citizen input on airport noise and also limit its treatment of airport noise only to helicopters, which might make sense from a certain point of view, but it eliminates a lot of really big offenders, which are large jets and seaplanes, which are a new craft on the horizon. They're very loud. They fly very low because they're not that aerodynamic. They have those big pontoons on them, and
Yes.
elevation, altitude really has a positive impact on the noise, ground noise below. So the higher the craft, the quieter the sense of it is from the ground. But these seaplanes can't gain altitude easily. They really labor to climb. I mean, they're safe, but they lumber along at a much lower altitude, and they're very noisy. So I don't, and that group, as far as I know, wasn't very active or successful in doing anything to really limit noise.
And then that evolved to this whole program that Mr. Stanzione has sort of, I don't want to use the word push through, but I guess push through is probably the right word.
Well, the airport master plan was in development for some years. It was begun during the McGinty administration, and it was drawn to a close at the end of the first Wilkinson administration. So it was in process for a really long time, inexplicably so, from my point of view. I don't know what took it so long. So to the degree that Councilman Stanzione actually wrestled that thing into some kind of a form that the town board then approved, he does deserve credit for that. The airport master plan is something that informs the choices of the town board as it goes forward in terms of the development at the airport. And that included a number of things, but allegedly a noise abatement program, but I haven't really seen anything that I feel is a real noise abatement policy. They have a list of things that might be done if and when it's kind of like these geometry theorems used to have, if this, then that. There was just a whole series it was just a list, basically, of things they might try. The airport, the seasonal control tower, which is now in operation and became operational, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, was a recommendation of the Airport Noise Abatement Advisory Committee with the understanding that it was meant to govern safety first. Clearly that was its first priority, but that it would have an impact on noise abatement policy or noise abatement. And we attended an informational meeting on June 30th where the air traffic controllers were actually there to explain to the pilots how this was going to work now, because this is a new concept for the pilots. They've been flying in and out of this airport since it's, I think it started in 1938, so we're talking 80 years or some such, without anybody telling them when and where to land and what have you. So it was a necessary element of introducing the control tower to the aviation community that they have an informational session. Some of us in the noise abatement community went to this informational session because we thought it was really important information. I found out about it quite by happenstance. It was just a tagline at the end of a story in the Star, and we thought, maybe we really should go to this thing and see what's going on. And it was said in no uncertain terms at this meeting that noise abatement was not part of the protocols of this tower. So that was a big disappointment to many of us in the noise abatement community that had supported this asset, because we understood that its top priority was safety, but that a secondary and important element of the operations of this tower would be to guide aircraft along routes that would be less impactful on the ground. They would require certain altitudes, at least higher altitudes than the pilots themselves might have chosen as they were coming to land or take off from the airport. And they would mix it up a little bit, so it wouldn't eliminate noise, but it would redistribute it, meaning that the neighborhoods that are most commonly traversed by the planes might get a break now and then. But we heard otherwise. Absolutely no noise abatement is part of the protocol there. I asked the controller myself, and we have a recording of it, so it's irrefutable that that's not in the plan. So I don't know what to say. The plan that Dominic is referring to when you speak with him about it is the Airport Master Plan and Noise Abatement Program. But when you look in it, Noise abatement program is a program that says, well, here's what we're going to do to abate noise in these communities. We're going to direct flights in this direction. We're going to maintain altitudes of such and such. We're going to put noise monitors in this, and this neighborhood to see what the noise levels really are and try to mitigate and ameliorate these impacts. But that's not in there.
Was there anything about restriction of hours?
No, I mean, they allege that they might be able to do that, but, and I suppose, I mean, I have to keep an open mind because, of course, I want noise abatement. I really think that the town, the noise-affected community deserves a break between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Emergencies notwithstanding. Someone has to be airlifted out because they've been in a car crash, no problem. We all want that possibility. We all want to be able to be airlifted out if that's some terrible tragedy befalls us, but that's not the program, so far as I can tell. As long as the FAA has control over our airport, which it does, we are bound contractually to the FAA to function in a certain capacity. When we take grant monies from them, when the FAA, there's a big pot of money that all of us as flyers, if you fly anywhere, when you buy your plane ticket, there's a tax on that ticket that goes to fund FAA programming. And the FAA, the mission of the FAA is to promote safety and air flight in as many places as it can. So the FAA is a pro-development aviation organization. They're not a pro-noise abatement, pro-small-time community, pro-let's preserve the character of your community by keeping the airport as the least impactful as possible. That's not how the FAA functions. They are all about growing a thing. They want to grow it. And the trend nationwide is to close small airports like East Hampton. The Quiet Skies Coalition unequivocally does not support closing East Hampton Airport. We never have said that. We do not promote that concept. But it's the common perception, I think, by some in the aviation community, and certainly by the FAA, that that's what people want. Because when you complain about noise, the easy way to say, well, how do you get rid of the noise? You get rid of the planes, right? So the aircraft isn't there, there's not going to be a noise problem. But that's not what we're trying to do. We support our local hobbyists and their ability to enjoy their hobby as long as they're good neighbors. But we don't enjoy good neighbor status with them. They don't, most of the small pilots are not our issue. It's a couple of big jet owners, and all the helicopters are very difficult. They're very difficult.
A lot of people will say, well, if you were against this, why did you buy a house that was near the airport? What is the answer?
That's a really good question. The answer to that is that when people bought their homes near the airport, and a lot of people will say, not only did you buy your house near the airport, but it was cheaper because it was near the airport. That may have been so. I don't know that for sure. The house I was originally in when I purchased it was not an inexpensive house. And it was on 2 acres of land that was very costly at the time. So I had no idea I was that proximate to the airport and that the flight path was so close, or that touch and goes would be in my life. I think what's happened here, and the airport is among them, it's this law of unintended consequences, that the town is overburdened by a number of people, and it's particularly in the summer season. We're having the same problem with the Indian Wells beach issue, and overcrowding and all the other problems that we deal with for a small community that has to address the needs of a much larger population on a seasonal basis. And no one ever expected the airport to grow like this. No one ever expected there to be that much traffic.
Of course.
Just like Montauk Highway, just like Main Street, downtown Managansett, you name it.
Yes, of course. No, I'm sure that when people bought their homes, it was near a small little airport.
Yeah, it was in the occasional biplane, and people were, would think, oh, look, a plane. It was kind of fun. It wasn't, oh my gosh, here comes another plane, or Apocalypse Now, which is really much more the case with the helicopters. And the helicopters have really bumped this into a different level of discussion, because the footprint of helicopter the sound footprint for a helicopter is huge. And it's alarming. You hear it well before the vehicle is in sight, and you hear it well past the vehicle has left the area. So you are, slowly unnerved. And our association with helicopters, because it was a military vehicle, is that there's something seriously wrong. Not that it's some, local guy flying his twin-engine otter, to show his grandkids the community. That's not our issue, really.
I didn't even know anybody would do that on a helicopter show what these
Oh,
days.
yeah. People take photographs. They take photographs, and they fly low.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's really, and elevation makes a big difference. If they're above, there's a minimum altitude recommended at 2,500 feet, which is helpful. Excuse me, but you can still hear them. It's not a cure-all.
I live in the Springs in Clearwater Beach, way at the end, 0.7 of a mile from water on 3 sides.
Very nice.
And yet I hear them all the time.
Do you? Well,
I do, and people, I know that people are here. You can hear them in the air.
well, one of the problems,
And by the way, I've owned my house for 10 years, and I didn't used to have that.
Right. Well, I've been in East Hampton over 30 years, and that's part. Well, let me just show you the graph I brought. The Quiet Skies Coalition made this graph. These are figures from the airport management
Okay.
that shows you the growth over 20 years from 1988 through 2010, I think. And that's the growth pattern. The
2008.
2008, excuse me, okay. I can't see it, so I can't tell you.
Right.
But the one column is jets, the next column is helicopters, and the larger column is the combined number of jets and helicopters. These are just jets and helicopters. It doesn't include seaplanes. It doesn't include small aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft. So you tell me, if you bought your house in 1988, how many operations were you paying attention to compared to 2007 or 2008, where it did go down because of the crash, right? The economic crash. There's definitely a relationship between aircraft operations and the economy. We don't question that. But this basic rise, you could easily say it's tripled since 1988. And the airport master plan that the town is so proud of doesn't use these numbers to factor in growth and what we can anticipate, which is one of our really big issues with the town. The document that they have produced isn't based in reality, and it doesn't calculate projects. Any project that's meant to happen at the East Hampton Airport is supposed to be evaluated through an environmental impact statement. That environmental impact statement is supposed to evaluate every project improvement according to single event noise standards, meaning if you're going to expand a runway or put anything else in, how many more single event noise operations might that influence?
Well, whose ruling is that?
The town, it's in the code.
Oh, it's in our town
It's
code.
in our town
It's another
code.
one of our town codes.
Exactly, that the town board is ignoring.
Is
Right.
ignoring,
And it
yes.
wasn't just this town board, it was the last town board. I mean, Democrats are responsible for that too. Pete Harmerly and Julia Prince signed off on that, to their everlasting shame, in my view. But that's another matter. But the problem is that we don't have a document that's going to protect us as a noise-affected community. It's a growth. It's a grow the airport document, and the local community said no growth, maintain it as it is. So we just keep working on that.
Well, I'll tell you the reason why I really was very interested in having you come on this time was because I remember the meeting where Dominic was talking about establishing and building this control tower. And at first it was $400,000 or something like that. And then even Bill was shocked that it was going to come in at $1 million.
Right.
And that's $1 million
Right.
of taxpayer money.
Well, let me correct you there. It isn't taxpayer money. It's actually airport surplus money. It's money that the airport generated through, there are several revenue streams by which the airport generates funding, money. And one is leasing. If you own a hangar, you have to lease the ground your hangar's on. You own the hangar and build the hangar, and everything in and on among the hangar is yours, but you lease the ground from the town. So there are lease agreements. There's also a fuel flow surcharge. So when they sell gas, aviation gas, avgas, there's a surcharge on that the town also gets, makes a profit on. And the landing fees and the transient landing fees, transient meaning people that come from other places who are not based here in East Hampton. There are about 100 pilots with planes here, plus or minus, based at East Hampton Airport. About half of them are actually Southampton residents, and half of them are East Hampton residents. And those folks do not pay landing fees ever, which is an interesting economic scheme. And the transient landing fees alone generate $600,000 a year, generally, annually. That's an average, but that's a lot of money. So the airport, under the excellent management of Jim Brundage over the last 5 or 6 years, has actually been banking that, whatever. They had a $1.5 million surplus till they started to build the control tower. So the $1 million, whatever that turns out to be, I think it's about $800,000 now, but it might go upwards of $1 million.
So what is
it's coming out of the airport surplus
So
budget.
what is this question about taking FAA money if they have enough to run there?
Because they probably wasted most of the money that they would need to do other large capital improvements. There's a runway repair that actually needs to be done, and those are very costly capital improvements. They do run in the millions of dollars. So a town struggling financially as ours has, if you're looking at it from a strictly economic point of view, you can see there's a rationale for taking FAA funding, because it's a 5 to 95% grant, so the town only had to put up 5% of the cost, and the FAA would fund the rest. It's not an insignificant sum of money when you're trying to repave a runway.
But just like when they talked about the federal government coming in and doing the beach repairs in Montauk, once you take federal money, you lose control. And that's what this issue really is about.
Precisely. You're exactly right. Once you take federal money for capital improvements or other large maintenance projects, which is available for any airport in the whole country, and I should tell you, only 17% of airports who are eligible to take money from the FAA. East Hampton isn't even in the majority of airports. I don't know why they do it. But what we have always asked for was a financial plan. Any other business that earned let's say the $1.5 million surplus that was generated over a 5-year period averaged $300,000 a year. So if you have a business that's earning $300,000 a year, you can make a business plan and bond against that income to plan for your capital improvements.
So also I wanted to ask you another question. You mentioned that there were hangars that were leased by people.
That's right.
Who are these people that lease these hangars?
Well, there are a variety of people. I don't actually know all of them, but many of them are local residents. Only half of them, I'm pretty sure, are East Hampton, own homes in East Hampton. The other half are Southampton residents, or they live someplace else altogether. It's hard to actually get that
And
roster.
do they make money on their?
Some of them do. I think some of them do. I mean, there's one operator, Krupinski, has a jet, and he's got a helicopter, and I think he owns a seaplane. I'm not exactly sure of that. I wouldn't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that he is, he's shuttling people. So, and that's really our big problem, is the taxi, the idea of using East Hampton as a landing area for taxi service. The local pilots just want to fly their planes in and out at normal times of day and, not buzz us at 2 a.m. or come in one after another. No problem there. But it's the ferrying of people to and from that makes it hard on the local residents.
And also they are a very select few.
That's true.
They are not the people who live here,
That's true.
generally speaking.
Right.
And so we're talking about a service that's provided
Talking about
to.
the 1%. It's
Yes,
definitely a
indeed.
1% issue.
I
Actually,
know I'm not doing
yeah,
it.
and we call it the 0.001% because we're talking about the uber rich for the most part.
Yes, indeed.
The airport noise, the helicopters in particular, even make the very rich who live in East Hampton part of the 99% because
Right.
most of those people wouldn't consider taking a plane out because it's just inconsiderate.
Yes. Well, this certainly is a saga that will continue and go
Yes, it
on
will.
and on.
Yes, it will.
And hopefully we can convince the powers that be not to take the FAA money so that we don't lose control. Because once the government steps in,
Right.
they're not going to put their money into anything that they can't control.
Right.
That is the basic
Right.
thing that we have to remember
Right.
about the FAA.
Right.
So thank you very much for coming, and
You're
I
welcome.
certainly do look forward to seeing you continually on at the board meetings. And
Thank you.
anybody who would like to see this this interview again, we are on YouTube, and also we have a website called The Democratic View, ehdemocraticview.org, and I believe you can see some of the stuff that we're talking about. Thank you so much for coming, Kathy.
You're welcome. Thanks for
Really,
having me.
Really appreciate it.
Sure
And
thing.
it's